Hello, music fans. Welcome to Death by Unicorn. This is my segment called What's New 2024, where I talk about new albums released in metal, rock, and prog. Today, I'm going to quickly give my first impressions on 11 albums that came out on February 23rd that I listened to, and I'll talk about them in my order of preference, starting with the Chronicles of Father Robin and the Songs and Tales of Airoea Book 3. Magical Chronicle Ascension. This is the third album by this band from Norway. They're kind of like companion pieces. There's book 1, book 2, and book 3. Book 1 and 2 were released to the general public on streaming in 2023, and book 3 was just released on February 23rd, 2024. But there was a big physical release box set last year that had all three together. So some people have heard this already if you bought that box set, but if you just listen on streaming, this is your first chance to hear part 3. This is symphonic progressive rock with folk influences. It's an excellent listen. I recommend people listen to it right after this video. Part 1 and 2 were both excellent as well, so I had every reason to believe part 3 would be too. And it really is. It's a bit more on the folk side compared to the first two parts, though they all had a bit of folk influence. This part uses a lot of acoustic instruments and vocal harmonies as well. Check out the Chronicles of Father Robin with the Songs and Tales of Airoea Book 3. Next, I want to talk about Borknagar and their album Fall. This is the 12th album by this band from Norway, and it's progressive black metal with folk metal, Viking metal, avant-garde metal, and neo-folk influences. I never listened to an album by them before this band, but I heard an early single from this album. It sounded good, so I put it on my list to listen to. There's a great blend of harsh vocals and clean vocals on this album. There's a lot of great folk influences scattered into their main progressive black metal sound. Check it out if you like bands like Enslaved and Eson. I think you'll like this. Next up is Job for a Cowboy with their album Moon Healer. This is the 5th album by this American band. It's technical death metal with deathcore and progressive metal influences. Another excellent album, like the two before that I mentioned. I've seen Job for a Cowboy live way back in the day, but when I saw them live, I didn't really like them too much at the time. But when I heard the single from this album, The Agony Sleeping Storm, I really liked the guitar playing and drumming. It sounded a lot more technical than I remember them being when I saw them live. I think they used to be more straightforward death metal and deathcore without as much technicality and progressive influence in there, but then they got more technical and progressive since I saw and heard them last. Right away with the opening track, everything sounds awesome. I even noticed that the bass playing and production sounds amazing, which is not always the case for metal albums, especially in tech death and deathcore. The vocals on this album are going to be too intense for anyone who can't handle brutal death growls the whole time, but they are really well executed if you're into that style of vocals. The guitar riffs and solos are great. The drumming is excellent. It's slow when it needs to be, but it can get very fast as well with the double kick. The bass sounds great. I love that it doesn't just double the guitar or play the chords, root notes the whole time. It's very busy bass playing. And if all their albums were this good, I would become a true fan of Job for a Cowboy. So check out Job for a Cowboy Moon Healer if that sounds cool to you. Next, I want to talk about a band called Semiramis, and their album is La Fine Non Esiste, which is Italian. This is the second album by this Italian band. They're a progressive rock band. It's another excellent album. It looks like they put out one album back in 1973, so they took a really long time between studio albums. They vanished only to put this out as their second studio album this year. I think they might have had a live album or two in between there every now and then, but this is only their second studio album, and their first was over 50 years ago. So I checked out some tracks on their 1973 album just to kind of get a feel for them before listening to this, and they were pretty cool. That's what made me put this on my list to listen to. An interesting thing I noticed when I was listening to this is that at the 3-minute mark of track 3, called Donna Dalle Ali Daccio, I don't know how to speak Italian, so I probably butchered the pronunciation. It sounds like the intro riff of the Yitzy Jam from Dream Theater's When Dream and Day Unite. So that became my favorite track on the album after a couple listens, just because that caught my ear. And then the rest of the track is cool. It's not like the whole track's a rip off of that song, but there's one riff in there that's so close to the main riff of the Yitzy Jam. But for the most part, this band actually reminds me more of progressive rock bands than progressive metal. So bands like Banco del Mutuo Cercoso, another Italian prog band, or Emerson, Lake and Palmer. It's closer to that than it is to prog metal, but every now and then there's a sprinkle of almost this hard rock and heavy metal riff from time to time. So it's pretty cool. I recommend this to any fans of old school progressive rock and especially the Italian progressive rock scene. Next up, I want to talk about Sleepytime Gorilla Museum and their release of The Last Human Being. This is the 4th album by this American band. It's avant-garde metal with some experimental and prog rock and even some black metal influences in there. This is the 4th album that they put out, but I never listened to an album by them before. But I did hear an early single from this. It was really unique and interesting, so that's what made me put this on my list to listen to. The song We Must Know is a very intense listen. The Gift was also great, and it's like avant-garde black metal. It reminds me of Enslaved and Eson. But the whole album has lots of male and female vocals. It has lots of classical instruments too, like violin and flute. The female clean vocals are very eclectic and remind me of Bjork's style. This is very quirky and avant-garde for people who are into weird stuff like Mr. Bungle and Diablo Swing Orchestra. Check out Sleepytime Gorilla Museum with Of the Last Human Being. Next, I want to talk about an EP by the band called Alase, and it's called Beyond Our Imagination. They're a band from Finland. This is atmospheric progressive metal. It's a very good listen. Not quite excellent. Now we're getting into the very good tier. Their 2023 album, A Matter of Time, was an excellent tier for me, so I expected this EP would be a great listen. It is only 4 tracks and just over 17 minutes. If there was a full album of this material, I would bump it up to excellent, but it is so short. The first track, Broken Pendulum, starts the EP off heavy, and it almost sounds like metalcore. It relies mostly on the male vocalist, but in tracks 2 to 4, they get a bit softer. They bring in the female vocalist to harmonize with the male vocalist, as well as bringing in more electronic ambience. The male vocalist's clean vocals remind me a lot of Opeth's clean vocals, so check this out if you're a fan of Opeth. Next up, I want to mention The Darkest Hour and their album Perpetual 1 Terminal. This is the 10th album by this American band. It's melodic death metal with metalcore and thrash metal influences. And I've always liked what I've heard from Darkest Hour, but I've never really loved any of it. I heard an early single here, sounded good, put it on my list to listen to. It is a very good album, just not quite excellent for me. They do mostly harsh vocals, but they have some clean vocals as well. One of the tracks with clean vocals was called One with the Void. It reminds me of Bullet for My Valentine. Mausoleum is a great track. It has acoustic verses, but a heavy chorus. And then there's great guitar leads throughout the whole album. Check this out if you're a fan of melodic death metal and metalcore and stuff like Inflamed, Soilwork, Dark Tranquility, Scar Symmetry, Trivium, and Bullet for My Valentine. It sounds like all those bands mixed together to me. I've got 4 more to go here. Next up is Amaranthe with their album The Catalyst. This is the 7th album by this Swedish band. It's power metal with a lot of pop and EDM influence, as well as some heavier influences in there like melodic death metal, symphonic metal, and metalcore. I heard some of their stuff before. It's just really catchy and poppy. This album has a heaviness to it. It has harsh vocals. There's a mix of female and male vocals in this band, which gives good contrast. There's a lot of clean female vocals that are very much like pop vocals. It sounds like Eurovision Song Contest dance pop mixed with power metal and mellow death. So check it out if that sounds good to you. That's Amaranthe with The Catalyst. Austrian Death Machine is the next one I want to talk about, and their album Quad Brutal. This is the fourth album by this American band. It's metalcore with thrash metal and melodic death metal influences. Another very good one. This band was founded by As I Lay Dying vocalist Tim Lambesis to be a parody of and tribute to Arnold Schwarzenegger, his personality in his movies. I know some people won't want to listen to this because Lambesis was found guilty of attempting to hire a hitman to murder his estranged wife. He served his time, but some people still want to boycott his art. But if we look past the person who's making the art and just base our opinions on this purely on the music, he can do some awesome harsh vocals. He's collaborated with a lot of great guitarists and drummers to make all these Austrian Death Machine albums, in addition to the work he does in As I Lay Dying. The concept here is a bit of a meme and a joke, but it's kind of fun, so I checked it out. I didn't really have high expectations of this, and while it's nothing groundbreaking, it is very well executed metalcore. It sounds like a stereotypical gym bro music, but I think that's kind of the point. It's pretty cheesy and it's not very deep, with songs like No Pain, No Gain, Hey Bro, Can You Spot Me, and Don't Be Lazy. It tries to be a bit motivational, but also a bit funny. It's not really that funny, but it's probably better that it's not too funny, because then it makes it more music focused than humor focused. It keeps it from being like a straight up comedy album. It's more about the riffs, breakdowns, the screams, the solos than it is about the jokes and the memes, but they're all there. I could see Gym Bros working out to this. Check it out if you like As I Lay Dying, or if you just want some heavy breakdowns to lift weights to. Second last one I'm going to talk about is North Sea Echoes with Really Good Terrible Things. This is the debut album by this American project. It's a duo. It's kind of alternative rock. It's got some prog, some ambient and post-rock influences. This project includes Jim Matheos and Ray Alder from Fates Warning. The music they worked on here didn't really fit the Fates Warning style, so they started a new project just for this release. It doesn't have any metal. It's more on the soft rock side. If you want to hear them do an album of ballads, this is the album for you. It's very well done. While I do love a ballad from time to time, I do prefer a lot of their works that have that heavier metal sound in them. And lastly, I'll talk about Jane Getter Premonition and their album Division World. This is the third album by this American project. It's progressive rock. It's got jazz fusion and a little bit of metal influence. This musical project is led by Jane Getter, who has played with many jazz and rock greats while garnering increasing recognition as a gifted writer, bandleader, instrumentalist, and vocalist. Her talent is undeniable, but the music on the album didn't grab me too much. It was all good, but probably not something I'll go back to much. And that's it for my first impressions on these 11 albums that came out on February 23rd. Let me know what you think of these down below in the comments, and let me know if there's any other albums that you listened to that came out recently that you think I'll enjoy. And stay tuned for next time. Peace out.